we're obsolescing jobs at a very rapid rate, and there are going to be a lot of humans around with idle hands that we're not going to have a productive use for, in my opinion. What happens is you're told, this is the history of this country. Well, wait a minute. You read some Rothbard and you realize that's not the history of this country at all.
Yeah.
That's actually not what happened. And then the scary thing is, it's not just finance and money, to health or food or, all these other things.
Media.
My favorite quote is Marcus Aurelius, who said, soon you will have forgotten all, and all will have forgotten you.
What's your other favorite quote?
Be bold and mighty forces will come to your aid. You got to take a shot in life. You got to have courage and you got to try. And
did those two worlds cross? Like, do we end up having these intelligent, embodied, mechanical beings? Like, is that the world we're going into? That sounds kind of semi-scary, actually.
Yeah, the scarier thing, I think, is government using these things against its own people.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Wow. Ooh. Welcome back, my man.
Good to be with you again, man.
Yeah.
Long time no see.
It's been a while. When is the last time we saw each other? MicroStrategy event?
Maybe Nashville. Did I see you in Nashville? No. You weren't there, were you?
I was there, but I was working the whole time.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Definitely that steak dinner in Miami was a good one.
Yeah.
That was the last solid time, just the two of us hanging out.
Yeah,
that was fun.
that was a good time. That was that's a long time ago. 22?
No, 22. 22 or 23.
Yeah. Definitely saw you at the MicroStrategy event in Orlando and also in 23.
23.
Yeah. It was a good time too.
Yeah. Now that you live in my backyard, I don't see you as much.
I know. Well,
I'll change that.
You're globetrotting.
Just working, man. Two working guys.
Yeah. Well, I might be seeing you more now. Sounds like you're into a better spot now.
Yeah, things are good.
Yeah.
Things are good.
Good. For those who may not know you, you are Eric Weiss, and you are one of the longest lived Bitcoiners there is, I think.
I don't know about that. 2013 is not
pretty early.
It's all relative. It's like I meet people who've been in for years longer, and I feel like a neophyte compared to them. And then it's also like every time, I mean, when you're out and you meet people or talk to people like Adam Back or somebody, it's I've been fortunate to hang out with him a bunch of times, and every time I see him, it's like, can we get a selfie? Can I get a picture? It's like, for that's my celebrity, It's like, I don't care about these pop stars or other stuff, but you see someone like Adam, it's like, holy shit, dude, you're the only person mentioned by name in the white paper kind of stuff.
Yes.
So it's rarefied air.
Yes. But so you've been in Bitcoin for 11 years. Bitcoin's been around for 15 years. So
yeah,
pretty long time.
I was slow.
What does that make me, man?
Everybody gets Bitcoin when they deserve it.
Twice as slow as you.
Well, I'm a little older than you are, so I had an advantage.
What can we just start there? Because I mean, you've also orange-pilled important people like your best friend Michael Saylor. Oh. But I'd like to learn, and we've talked about some of this previously, but I don't know that we talked in depth about your orange pill experience. So
okay,
I want to hear what it was, right? What was it like? What took you into it from a business standpoint, from an intellectual standpoint? And then as you've journeyed through Bitcoin, has it changed you? Has it changed your outlook on the world? Has it changed your life philosophy? This seems to be a common theme with a lot of Bitcoiners.
Tremendously. So in a previous life, I was in venture capital, focused almost exclusively on internet VC. And this went back to kind of the golden age of internet, late 90s, early 2000s, including the bubble burst there. And one of the things you do in venture capital world is you go to trade shows that are related to your industry, right? It's like that's where you see new companies, new ideas, et cetera. And I was with a company called Internet Capital Group, ICG. They were a big high flyer of the internet era, and they did mostly business to business internet related type investments. kind of a publicly traded VC. It was actually the largest IPO of 2000. So I had invested them in that company when I was at GE, and then I joined the company after making the investment to be one of their investment guys. And we got really good at knowing what the internet was good for and what it was not good for. And what it was good for was sharing information globally, quickly, getting really valuable information into the hands of people who might otherwise not be able to find it, right? But because of the reach of the internet, you could make them someone aware of something that's really relevant to them. That had tremendous value. What the internet was not good for was transmitting value or e-commerce. People were, and to agree still are, petrified of e-commerce. They don't want to put their credit card, any personal information, anything into the internet because it's just not safe. Turns out those fears were very justified. It's not safe, right? Everybody's data is everywhere because of every hack, right? And so it really was pretty unsafe. And I went to a Bitcoin conference in 2013, coincidentally here in Miami at the convention center.
Which one was that?
It was, it wasn't any of the ones that exist today.
Yeah, I know that.
No, it was just like a little Bitcoin conference. And when I say little,
2013.
I don't think there were more than 100, 150 people there.
Wow.
And everybody was walking around with t-shirts that said like, I can help you set up your wallet or something. And I had no idea what Bitcoin was when I got there, but.
And how did you get, that was just because the internet company got you turned on to this conference?
It was just because when, I went to like online marketing conferences too, it's like, what's the internet being used for? Is there a business application here? Are there any companies in this space that we want to invest in? So from that kind of point of view. So I went there in 2013. I saw Bitcoin and my mind was blown. This was the first time, and I'm not sure I would have articulated it quite this way back then, but it was the first time that I saw the internet being used to transmit value safely and securely without a trusted third party in the middle, right? Even better, party A didn't need to know or trust party B at all. And my mind was just blown. Like, this was the internet being used for something of like tremendous value in my opinion.
Just as soon as you saw it, like, was it reading the white paper? Like, was there
no,
a
I
light
didn't even
bulb
know.
moment?
At this time, I didn't even know there was such thing as a white paper. I didn't know it existed. I walked into this conference saying, what's Bitcoin? Tell me what is Bitcoin? And so I left that conference thinking, this is amazing. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to build a Bitcoin related company. And I racked my brain for what kind of company can I build in this space, in Bitcoin, on Bitcoin. Didn't even know what terminology I would use, right? And the best idea I could come up with at the time was, well, I could create an online directory of companies that accept Bitcoin. That wasn't a good idea then, wouldn't be a good idea today, right? So I came up with no good business idea that I could come up with. And I was like, but I did understand that the supply was limited or fixed, right? And that if this was going to turn into something, that owning some of it would be a good idea. So Q4 2013, I bought my first Bitcoin on Coinbase. And it was just way more volatile than I could have expected.
What was it? Do you recall the price point then? That would have been...
I think it was in like the 600s. Okay. It's on the Bitcoin node sculpture that Fractal did for me because it was set to... I went back to Coinbase and I actually got my first trade. And so the exact block, the exact everything. I'll tell you what's amazing. You know how many transactions were in my block that the first trade? 21.
Oh, really?
Isn't that cool?
That's freaking cool.
21 transactions in the whole block. It also means like how nascent Bitcoin was that there were only 21 transactions in 10 minutes, right? So
because now, for point of reference, there would be thousands or tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands. Yeah. So I mean, we could check Clark Moody dashboard, but so that was my first transaction, my first purchase.
So $600 price point. This is before it ran up to like 1,100 and crashed to 200 or something, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And so it did run up. It did crash. I felt like a genius for a second and I instantly felt like an idiot. And I realized that my investment was more like more of an emotional investment than a good investment, so to speak. In hindsight, it was a good investment. But the reality is, on a risk adjusted basis, I think Bitcoin is a much better investment now than it was then. Back then, it was a hope and a prayer.
Yeah.
There was no way to, legitimately envision that Bitcoin would take the path that it's taken, clear the hurdles that it's cleared, and be in the position that it is now. This was just I really like this thing. I like what it stands for. I like the way the internet's being used. I want to be a part of this. I want to be involved, profit off it, whatever. And so it went up, it went down. I was up 100%, down 80%, whatever it was. And I just said, you know what? I've invested too much money here and this is too volatile for me. And I sold all my Bitcoin in 2014. So I don't have...
Whereabouts? What were you selling near the top? Or
when I look back and I got the data to give Fractal to do the node sculpture, all the transactions were there.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get myself to look at it. So I don't know what price I sold at.
So many people have been through similar journeys as this. All right, they either sold all their Bitcoin or got liquidated, or they're trying to get back to the amount of Bitcoin they once had.
I still do not have the amount of Bitcoin that I had then, but I am getting close.
That's good.
Getting close.
Good news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it started, and then I just stayed close to it for a long time because I was interested, and then when things started to pick back up again, I was the one that buddies were calling saying, hey, you were into this stuff, what's going on? And then kind of like reignited.
So you were orange pilled yourself.
Yeah.
At a conference, basically.
Correct.
And then you un-orange pilled yourself.
No, I wouldn't say I un-orange pilled myself.
Okay.
I got away. I was still passionate about it. I still believed in it, liked it, not believed it in an investment sense, believed that the internet could be used for something to transmit value. And this was something that was going to happen, was necessary, and was a good and big thing. But the investment case for it at the time on a risk reward basis didn't make sense to me anymore. Right. So right now, given the price of Bitcoin at, wherever we are today, 60,000-ish, right? Today, on a risk adjusted basis, I think Bitcoin is an infinitely better investment than it was at $600 in 2013.
Because its chances of success are much higher. The risk is much lower, basically.
Correct.
Yeah. So you were still bought in philosophically.
Yeah.
Even as you're selling your Bitcoin. Then at what point do you start kicking yourself and start buying Bitcoin again? I'm assuming you were kicking yourself, but
I wasn't kicking myself. I was working, right? And I had other businesses and focused on making my businesses successful and earning fiat and, being successful in business requires focus, right? So I was pretty focused. 2016-ish kind of time frame when this stuff started coming back strong and the whole crypto world started coming back strong, that's when I kind of got back into it.
Gotcha.
And have been stacking since then. So, sub 10,000 is where I've been stacking. I don't have any idea what my average cost is at this point.
Yeah.
I've bought, sub 10,000 Bitcoin and I've bought, more than, I bought over 69,000.
Yeah.
So I no longer think I have any ability to time it.
Yeah.
I just try to buy it when I have the money to buy it.
Just dollar cost average forever, basically.
I don't even think about it in those terms, but I guess it is. I just think about it in terms of what's my stack and is my stack more or less than it was, Gotcha. If I've got 5 Bitcoin and at the end of the year I got 5.5 Bitcoin,
you're up 10%.
I'm up 10%.
Yeah, got it. So you're already thinking in Bitcoin terms.
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we live in a fiat world still, so I think in fiat terms as well. I'm not like a lunatic about it, but I think of my Bitcoin stack in Bitcoin terms.
So when did it? I mean, so you're orange pilled, But when did you start to get the like philosophical implications of Bitcoin, or the larger geopolitical implications, if you want to look at it that way? When did that start to like really hit you?
I don't know that I ever thought about that before. So my coming out of a career in finance, traditional finance, my focus was from an investment point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And then I orange pilled Saylor, right? And that process took me down a lot of rabbit holes that I hadn't taken myself down. As you know, better than anyone at this point, after what, 20 some odd hours, right? The man asked some questions. And so he quickly, over the course of a few weeks, ran down every Bitcoin path there was to find out that I just didn't have any more information on that topic.
Was this 2020?
Yeah.
That it started? Okay.
2020.
So after...
It was during COVID.
Okay.
We were spending a lot of time hanging out at his place here.
Got it.
Pretty comfortable surroundings, better than my apartment.
Yeah.
And talking about the world, trying to figure out what was going on. Things were, really irrational.
Yeah.
Everything's closed. Stock market's going up.
Yeah.
This didn't make sense to us. We're like, just can't be this way. Businesses need to be open to do well.
Yeah.
Right. And so, we were exiting our investments, and I'd been talking about Bitcoin a lot. And usually when I brought it up, it's like, wasn't a topic of interest to him. But due to the fact that the world had changed so much and we were trying to make sense of things, this time when I brought it up, during COVID, his response was different. He said, tell me more about that, and that's what we talked about for a few weeks. And then at the end of that few weeks, he said, well, if I wanted to buy some of this, how would I go about buying it? And then I got him set up to buy it. And then a couple months actually go by, because it took a while to get set up back then. And unbeknown to me, by the way, was that he was thinking about what to do with MicroStrategy's money. That never came into our conversations. And then, a couple months go by, and I'm pulling into a restaurant down here to meet some folks, and the phone rings, and it's Saylor. And I'm like, what's up? And he's like, I bought Bitcoin. And I'm like, great. And at the time, Bitcoin was like exactly 10,000 for Bitcoin. He's like, yeah, 10,000. And I was like, you bought one Bitcoin? And he's like, no, Eric, I bought 10,000 Bitcoin. So like in like one sentence, I went from being really excited that I got him into Bitcoin to like, oh my God, $100 million of personal, not corporate.
Yeah.
It was a big investment. So yeah.
Were you consciously trying to orange pill him at the time, or were you just talking
I've been trying to orange pill him for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was. But for me, to go back to your original question, like it was an investment. It was an investment for me.
Yeah.
And it was after Michael got into it, because when he got into it, he was forced to look at things from a different angle and reconsider everything, right? To use it as a store of value for the $500 million that his company had on the balance sheet. So he's the one who kind of like tilted things and looked at it a little differently. And, as a result of being the person who orange pilled him, I also became, the person who talked to him throughout this entire journey and shared a lot of learnings and observations. And I had the benefit of having the smartest person I've ever met, share some of these observations with me and think them through with me. And so it was through his realizations, observations, debunking a lot of things that we thought were true that aren't true, and going up this learning curve of things that we thought we learned in school or business school or whatever, that we realized maybe we didn't really learn these things. Maybe we just learned the version that they wanted us to know. And so it was as a result of going through this journey with Michael that I started to question more things, not just in traditional finance, but as you know, you start questioning everything. And it's like, well, what else have I been, I don't want to say lied to about, but what else have I just accepted what I've been told instead of questioning it?
Yeah, other things you've accepted at face value.
Yeah.
Rather than doing the work, so to speak, to understand it at a deeper level.
Yeah, it's worse than that, I think. It's a little more pernicious than that, because you go to school to learn and you just assume that the curriculum and these things your teachers in as low as grade school and as high as graduate school are teaching you are to a degree correct.
Yeah.
Right. And if they're not correct, they're telling you that there's a lot of subjectivity here.
Yes. Yeah.
But that's not what happens. What happens is you're told, this is the history of this country. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You read some Rothbard and you realize that's not the history of this country at all.
Yeah.
That's actually not what happened. Right. And so that's changed the way I view a lot of things.
And so, because obviously he's very philosophically, it's more than just to buy Bitcoin and use it for its utility, right? You almost get on this mission basically, right? Where, hey, we see world history a different way. We see another path forward for the human race, not to sound too grandiose, but it really is that, right? It's shifting an entire economic paradigm that's really antithetical to central banking in almost every way, right? It's central bank is closed source, opaque, prints money ad infinitum. Bitcoin's open source, radically transparent, and it does quantitative tightening instead of quantitative easing. So it's this major shift in paradigm.
They have different purposes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at the risk of oversimplifying it, central banks are there to perpetuate the nation state, and Bitcoin is there to perpetuate the holder.
The individual.
The individual, company, country, but the holder of the asset.
Yeah. Yeah. So what does that do? Like, why? I guess the unanswered question in Bitcoin is, why is this thing inspiring such deep personal transformations in the lives of, it's not just holding Bitcoin. You also have to kind of study it and, get on that mission basically. But what is it about Bitcoin that causes it to give its adherents, I guess would be the term, this transformative potential in their lives?
It's a good question. I think first of all, it's not everyone that starts to question things, right?
Yeah.
The majority of my investors in Bitcoin Investment Group, which is for family offices and high net worth individuals, very few of those people are questioning things. They're saying, okay, it looks like this thing's gaining traction, might be a digital gold, price is going to go up. I want some of it.
Buy some,
right? They're not saying, is the medical complex fucking with my health, right? Or, are the numbers coming out of the government bullshit? That's not the path they're going down. But once you've done your 100,000+ hours of Bitcoin, it forces you to question things, right? Like, you wouldn't need Bitcoin so much if the inflation rate was the 2 or 3% that the government tells you that it is.
Yeah.
But like, something doesn't feel right there, right? Like, the price of the things we want are not 2 to 3% more. They're 50% more, 100% more, it's like, and so something is just not passing the sniff test. And so then you start questioning and you're like, well, what goes into this inflation number? What's the basket of goods that they're using? Why did this used to be in the basket of goods and it's no longer in the basket of goods anymore?
Why are food and energy not in there?
Right. And it's like, well, the prices of those things have gone up too much. We can't keep them in there anymore. We need, we're going to make a rational substitution. You don't need the price of a movie ticket to be in there because that's gone from 50 cents to $15. You don't need that in there. But we can value what watching a movie's worth, and you can get Netflix for $15 a month and you can have 500,000 movies. So $15 divided by 500,000, however they jerry-rig their bullshit so that they get the answer they want, which is inflation's low, the utility you're getting, whatever, right? So once you start realizing that they're fucking you like that and you're just kind of accepting these numbers that you're being fed, then it makes you question stuff. And it only takes to the objective, rational person who's interested in learning. And, it's really is the matrix, right? Like, do you want to take the pill or not? Like, ignorance really can be bliss, So it's like once you get one data point that you realize was bullshit, and then you start questioning, you're like, well, what else?
Yes.
It's like when your girlfriend catches you lying. It's like, well, you lied about that one little insignificant thing. What else are you lying about? It's the same kind of unraveling. And it's like
they say sometimes when a murderer is caught, a whole string of crimes is solved. It's you pull the thread, right? And then something can come unraveled.
Exactly. And then the scary thing is, like, it can come unraveled in any area you want to look at. It's not just finance and money. You can look at it as it relates to health or food or, all these other things. Media. Yeah, exactly.
World history, to your point.
The scariest thing for me is like health too. It's like I started questioning those things too. You get your cholesterol taken, it's high. Well, we need to start you on this statin. And it's like, you do? Why? Because there was one study done about cholesterol that shows a correlation between heart disease and high cholesterol. But correlation isn't causation, right? So like, does the presence of high cholesterol mean that I'm going to have heart problems? So it's like you start questioning these things, whereas like the medical complex is just like, my doctor's like, here, take this statin. I'm like, I'm told there's good and bad cholesterol. Which one do I have? He's like, well, we don't know. And I was like, well, how do we find out? He's like, well, you can go get this CT scan with, dye injected, but it's not covered by insurance. It's going to cost you $5,000. I'm like, let's do it. I'm not taking a medication for the rest of my life. Turns out, a score of 0 to 5, I was a 1. And it's like, he's like, yeah, you don't need to take this shit at all. I'm like, great. But like, you would have had me taking it. So you just start questioning things, which I think is healthy, but it's also can be depressing, Can
be depressing.
Yeah.
Especially, but this is probably the downside to getting into Bitcoin, actually, especially if you don't have others around you that are getting into it. Because it can cause you to start to see the world in this new light, which is, well, maybe that's a bad metaphor because it's actually, you're starting to see the darkness of the world in many ways, right?
You could take the positive view. You're taking away the darkness. You're seeing the light.
You're seeing the truth. Yeah. But the truth, it can be bleak sometimes,
it can certainly be different than what you thought.
Yes. Yeah. And if you're going through that intellectual journey and you're not joined by some party members, then that can get lonely. That can get, and a lot of Bitcoiners say that actually, when you see them at conferences, they seem really relieved to be, surrounded by people that just get it and understand.
People think the same way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Have you ever wanted to live in an off-grid community with complete food, energy, and water independence? If so, then you need to check out the farm at Okefenokee. The farm is a pioneering community designed to foster longevity and well-being, eliminating elements that detract from these goals. At the farm, the convergence of nature, nutritious food, a supportive community, and the ethos of slowing down is unparalleled. Positioned at the gateway to the UNESCO World Heritage-nominated Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, the farm at Okefenokee stands as a testament to a lifestyle that truly nurtures health and happiness. Unlike conventional housing developments where a token communal garden may suffice, the farm itself is the community. Small, intimate micro-villages seamlessly integrate into the fabric of a sprawling agricultural community. So if you're interested in joining this off-grid community, then go to okefarm.com today to learn more about becoming a member. Make sure to tell them that I sent you for a $21,000 discount on their custom cabin pricing. Again, go to okefarm.com to learn more about joining this revolutionary regenerative agriculture community. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to WolfNYC.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. It's interesting, the inflation thing. It's like, okay, if the price, let's construct a metric for inflation that we'll call CPI.
Right.
But it's a basket of goods that the prices of which move, and we'll sort of aggregate or average them together, and we'll give you this inflation metric. But if the price moves too much on any given item, like you gave the example of a movie ticket or food or energy, they actually strip out those things for that very reason. So the metric that's intended to measure price volatility, if the good in the basket becomes too volatile, they arbitrarily remove it.
Not arbitrarily.
Well, pretty arbitrarily. Well, when I say arbitrarily, it's like there's no formula. No. It's just someone's like, oh, this thing's too...
They do the same thing with the Dow Jones Industrial Average.
Right.
Right? I mean, is Kodak still in the Dow? No, they do that, but Apple is, right? So it's like, well, this company's become obsolete. Let's drop it from the Dow 30 and put in these hot new companies. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you look at the Dow over time, it's done this.
Yeah.
But what is it? It's not 30 stocks. It's probably like 130 stocks that have been through there. You've just dropped out the ones that crapped out and replaced them with new high flyers. So what's the validity of that index if you look at it over time?
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you consider all the knock-on effects, because CPI, it's taken as gospel as inflation, right? Like CPI equals inflation. First of all, if you go a layer deeper than this and read Mises, you'll know that you actually can't quantify inflation with a metric because it's as subjective as value itself. So it's kind of a non-starter to begin with. But when you have CPI that is equated with inflation, and inflation is used in all of these other instruments, right? Like if you buy a treasury or an inflation protected treasury, a TIPS.
Yeah, TIPS.
Right? It's only designed to outperform the CPI number. So it's not actually going to even protect you from inflation because
I was actually a bond trader when the TIPS came out for the first time.
Yeah. So like, you put bullshit in the metric. I mean, the metric itself from the jump can't even ever be what it says it's going to be because you can't quantify inflation. But then it's even worse.
Well, different things have different rates of inflation. So it's like to try to simplify it down to one number when it's really like a vector is challenging as well.
Yeah, it's impossible, I think. I mean, because it's ultimately down to the individual market actor and the things they're looking to buy.
I tend to just look at money supply.
Yeah, changes in monetary inflation is actually measurable.
Yeah.
Price inflation, I don't think is though. I
think you can measure.
You can see the price of an individual type of good going up and down, but I don't think you can aggregate it into a meaningful number.
I think it's useful at times. Gold's a good example, right? They say that an ounce of gold has always, been able to buy like one fine man's suit. And it's still pretty true, right?
Yeah, yeah. But even that would just be, you're just looking at the price of gold in terms of a man's suit. There's not really an inflation metric built there.
Correct.
So you're just pricing things in terms of gold, and gold is basically money. So that's why.
Yeah, but it's a way to say that it's kind of done a decent job. I guess, of staying with it.
Yeah. So anyways, I guess the point I was trying to drive at is it's like when you put bullshit in that one metric and then all these other financial instruments or, agreements, people are probably in their own private business dealings. Well, if you're going to pay me this annuity, but it needs to be inflation adjusted, it's like, well, it's not actually being adjusted to a real inflation number. You go through COVID, right? And they say, oh, inflation's 7%. What were they reporting? 7% a year or something? But the price of steak is up 50, 60, 70%.
Well, pre-Bitcoin, you could also make a little bit of the case that what's the point of knowing? Like if you can't do anything about it, then why know? Okay, it's like you still want to have the best investments possible so that you do better than whatever inflation there is, right? But like, why do you want to know if you can't fix it, if you can't do anything about it? And so I think Bitcoin, all of a sudden there was a way that you could beat inflation like definitively.
Yeah.
And people were like, okay, this now calls into question a lot of these other metrics.
Yeah.
Now we have to dig in a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it was for me is Bitcoin got me to read someone like Mises to really get my head around this thing. And then you stop focusing on the price inflation, which is just a consequence of the money supply inflation. And then you come to see what money supply inflation actually is. And it's just organized, legalized counterfeiting, basically.
Yeah. I mean, yes, you can dig into that part of it, or, my version. That upsets me. I just look at it. It's kind of above my pay grade. It is what it is. I don't control it. And it's a reality. So actually, when I talk to new prospective Bitcoiners, I describe inflation from a money supply point of view. And the example I use is, whatever city we're in or something, I say just like, imagine that, here we are in your favorite restaurant and, you like this chicken parm, which is $35, and then tonight when we go home while we're asleep, they put a dome over this city and everybody's money doubles overnight. You had $1,000 in the bank, you wake up and you have 2,000. Same with the restaurant owner, same with the server, everybody.
Yeah.
When we come back to this restaurant tomorrow night, how much is your chicken parm going to be? Right? Is it going to be 30? And the answer is somewhere between $35 and $70.
Yeah.
Right? And they get it. Right? So like increasing the money supply in and of itself causes inflation.
Yes.
Period.
Yeah. No, bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo. And it drives me crazy. Like, cause you see Joe Biden on the Super Bowl commercial talking about, well, forget Joe Biden. We're on to Kamala Harris now. Kamala Harris is now saying she's going to pass legislation to control prices.
Yeah.
Actual Soviet grade price controls.
Yeah.
And so talk about the knock-on effects is like you get into absolute clown world where politicians actually think they can legislate economic reality, which what is a price, right? A price is just a quantitative expression of people's preferences, basically.
Yeah. But it has to be market driven, right? Like,
market driven. Yeah.
If you're priced in a way that, the market isn't willing to pay it, your price will have to come down.
Yeah. It won't be a real price. Right. So ultimately it's like the demand for something where it meets the supply for something is you're quantitatively expressing the preferences of consumers. The foolishness of the political apparatus thinking you can pass legislation that will change people's preferences. I mean,
I think it's a good question. Is it foolishness? Is it, are these people knowledgeable and they're doing this knowingly, trying to gaslight and manipulate? Is it really pure ignorance? It's like anyone with a brain would know that if you wanted to bring the cost of these grocery items and a lot of this other stuff down, that at the core of that is energy component, right? Every single thing in that grocery store has arrived there by truck.
Yeah.
And the trucking company, the manufacturer of whatever good they're shipping you, they're not going to bear the brunt of that increase in fuel cost. And if it's up 50 some odd percent from where it is, that gets passed directly on to the consumer and reflected in the price on those shelves. Yeah. So you want to start taking a bite out of inflation? Why don't you figure out how to bring down energy prices? It's not that hard a thing to do. You know, it's like, okay, maybe you go back to being a little more energy independent, producing it here at home as much as we can. And maybe that brings down energy a bit. Maybe the prices come down, but mandating that a company is greedy and can't have profits, like that's crazy talk.
I think it's insanity. I mean, given this is why I hope it's not as true as I say it is, but it seems to me like we're coming out of the economic dark ages in many ways. Like we still are flirting with the ideas of price controls. We're flirting. I mean, the fact that it seems to me like the general viewpoint on profit is that it is evil or bad in some way. When in fact, we wouldn't get anything done in this world without a profit motive.
Correct. Yeah, it's the single greatest driver of everything, innovation, everything, right?
It's the primary economic motivator.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree with you. I think it's this is not complex stuff, right? It's economics 101.
Yeah.
If you have a producer of anything in that grocery store and they're making really outsized profits because they're gouging the consumer,
right. Competition.
Is there a better business model than come in and undercut those guys who are gouging and make just a little bit less than they are?
Yeah.
Of course not. Every competitor is going to do what everybody's coming in, and then, you'll get right back down to that market price soon enough, and you'll find that equilibrium.
Yeah.
So it's just, but the problem with career politicians is they're career politicians. They have no business experience whatsoever. They've never managed anything to a budget or hired and fired people, or they just have very little understanding of business. And a lot of people think that an understanding of business makes you evil. The reality is it's essential. Government's just a really big business.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It makes you pragmatic, in touch with reality. And it does seem like there's a distinct out of touchness when you hear this stuff.
Understatement, man.
These commercials and the fact that, sorry to go back to Joe Biden, but the fact that he can do a Super Bowl commercial eating the ice cream and then blaming the greedy ice cream producers for the prices going up. And it the millions of people watching the Super Bowl aren't rolling out the guillotines the next day on that guy. It just tells me like, oh, people really don't understand what's going on here at all. The fact that he can say that and people,
I didn't see it, fortunately.
Yeah.
I was there. So no commercials.
It's standard political rhetoric, always blaming the producer for price increases. Never mentioning the money supply or the central bank. None of that.
Never taking any of the blame as government. God forbid anything they did was iatrogenic and exacerbated the problem at all. That's become like the MO for government officials is never admit wrongdoing. Just never.
Yes.
It's like it's very depressing.
Yeah, very abusive. So back to Bitcoin as the solution to a lot of these problems. What is it about, and Saylor talks a lot, he uses a lot of metaphors, a lot of analogies to describe Bitcoin. And this is all very important because Bitcoin, I think this is why we can spend so much time talking about it and not exhaust the idea, is because it is something that's like such a radical innovation that we are having to almost invent new words to deal with it, or new concepts, or it ties together so many concepts that, that exists, but in a novel way. One idea that I go back to a lot in my studies of Bitcoin is Bitcoin as private property. It's like the ultimate form of private property. My definition, which I'm pulling from the libertarians, is basically the relationship between an owner and an asset. Like how strongly or how certainly, with what degree of assurance can an owner own an asset that can't be taken away from them without consent. The stronger that relationship is, the more clear your pricing is, the more innovation, the more wealth creation, the better civilization is, basically.
Right.
Why is it important to talk about Bitcoin as property? And is that, it seems to be helpful for some people, but it also still seems to be slightly too abstract. Like when I say the word property, people think I mean real estate. Why is it important to frame it that way?
I think maybe the basis of why it's important is property rights are fairly well established. Especially in the US or first world countries. right? Property rights are something that are pretty well established. So establishing Bitcoin as property is constructive in that regard. It's like, this belongs to me, you can't take it. And there's the theory of that, and there's the reality of that, right? This house that belongs to me that you can't take, well, this house sits in a jurisdiction and there's eminent domain, and it can be seized by the government under, circumstances that are unclear at best.
Yeah.
And it's like, they want to put a highway right through here, they can just take this house. So, that's not ideal. And that's in the US. So take that property to a less safe jurisdiction where there's more geopolitical risk or other things, you can lose that pretty easily as well. So having a true bearer asset is very challenging. Even to the extent that your bearer asset is physical, it can be taken away from you by force. So in a lot of ways, Bitcoin really is the perfect property because you can really own it. It can't be taken from you. And you can either access it or take it anywhere in the world you want, to any jurisdiction, pass it forward in time. It's incredibly powerful in that way. But yeah, it does require thinking a little bit differently. And from an investor's point of view, dealing with these folks, every day, people really do like analogies. They like something to be like something else.
Yeah.
So the digital gold analogy is really constructive because Bitcoin has a lot more utility than gold.
Yeah.
And so to describe it as a digital gold versus an analog gold, that's very easily conveyed. People get that.
Yeah.
And if you struggle with an older generation that maybe doesn't get it so quickly, the younger generations get it really quickly because they have no problem paying $10 for a particular avatar they want in a video game. So that digital asset has real value to them. They get that. So they're not spending money on a digital asset that you can't touch and can't do. They're already good with that. So it's an easy transition for younger generations.
Yeah, that's a great point. Digital gold is also so useful when you're talking about history of money and explaining the different functions of money, the properties of money as it pertains to Bitcoin. Like going through the gold rabbit hole is perfect for that. What about comparing Bitcoin to traditional stores of value like gold, like real estate? How do you, again, Saylor uses analogies of like owning a block of Manhattan in 1920. So like, what is it about real estate, gold, and Bitcoin that we can draw comparisons through to better explain Bitcoin?
I think the first thing, this conversation was a lot more challenging 2 years ago, right? Yeah. Because first you had to get the individual that you're having this conversation with to accept the fact that Bitcoin was an asset.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
That was the first step.
Not a Ponzi scheme.
Now that you've got the ETFs and Larry Fink and all these, incredibly credible sources saying, yeah, this is a legitimate asset. Now we can compare assets, right? And when you start comparing Bitcoin to those other assets, it's got tremendous attributes, relatively speaking. And we can go down that rabbit hole if you like, but I know you know all of them, but it's just, it's superior in almost every way. Buying an asset of any kind is one thing. Being able to keep that asset is another thing, right? Is it a house that has a 2% annual tax, which, is going to eat away at taking that asset away from you, and then value of the house increases, you're paying 2% on a larger number. Yeah. You're really losing that asset quickly. Are they creating more of the asset, and your asset went from being relatively scarce to not so scarce? That hurts. And so when you start comparing Bitcoin's attributes to all those things, even something like traditional gold, right? It's like, well, they're going to dig another 1 to 2% of traditional gold out of the ground every year. Can't do that with Bitcoin, right? So you start comparing Bitcoin to all these different things. Can it be seized? Can it be stored? How much does it cost to store it? All this stuff. We start to compare incredibly favorably, but it does require that people first accept it's an asset and a real asset that they're not going to get in trouble for owning. That's not going to get taken away from them. And then B, having the thoughtfulness and intellectual honesty to compare it to other assets. You get people going down that path, they come away with the conclusions that we have.
So the conversation has changed a lot in the past 2 years, largely thanks to Bitcoin being accepted by more traditional financial institutions and thinkers and quote unquote smart money guys. Where does it stand today in terms of dealing with high net worth individuals? Like, are there still hurdles that remain? There are hurdles. What are the common blockages you see today? And do you think those will be cleared up in the years ahead?
Yeah. So it kind of ties into our little Bitcoin adage. Everybody gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve. Right. And part of that is people get Bitcoin at the price they need. Right. There are plenty of people in the world, many of whom I deal with, who are just fine financially in any scenario, right? We can have rampant inflation. A lot of the assets they own are going to inflate. They're just fine. They're generationally fine. So they don't have this, they don't think they have this burning need to figure out this thing really quickly because all their money is going away, right? So, those people kind of come along a little slower. It's when you have a catalyst that people start to realize really quickly. But that group is progressing. The ETFs was a huge, huge factor in this. It legitimized the asset class from a regulatory point of view. That's what this ilk cares about, right? They care about not getting on the wrong side of the law, things like that.
Yeah.
So that chasm that we crossed was huge, legitimizing the asset. Billions and billions of dollars of institutional capital flowed in. That was super helpful. What's it going to take to get to the next level? What are the current issues? The biggest one is being in custody and being able to borrow against it. So SAB 121 needs to get repealed. If Biden hadn't vetoed it, it passed. We know that there's bipartisan support.
Can you tell me
Congress.
What that is? Actually,
yeah, this is what prohibits traditional banks from custodying Bitcoin.
Okay.
And they want to.
Okay.
Right? So
is that Sarbanes-Oxley?
SAB 121.
Okay.
Sarbanes-Oxley is the
separation of investment banks from.
Yeah, this is just legislation that says if banks, I think technically I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure what it says is you can custody Bitcoin, but you have to hold dollar for dollar reserves.
Gotcha.
You want to custody $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, you have to hold $1 billion worth of cash in your bank.
Right.
It's idiotic,
Makes
right?
No sense. Yeah.
It goes against the entire fractional reserve banking system, right? Yeah. But it's really important that banks be able to custody. It's banks' ability to self-custody, basically, right? Ironically.
Yeah.
So it's a really important thing. And reading between the lines, I think what happened was Gary Gensler, in my opinion, thought that if banks could custody Bitcoin, this might just grow a little too quickly for his comfort. And so he went to the administration and he said, hey, you've got to veto this if it gets to your desk, And Biden said, if this makes it to my desk, I'm going to veto SAB 121, right? And so I don't think he ever thought it was going to get to his desk. I think he thought that the Democrats would make sure to shoot it down. But what happened was the Democrats, their constituents, and not, crazy ones like the mainstream ones, the Chuck Schumers and Nancy Pelosi's of the world, right? Their constituents are the banks, right? In their states. And the banks have invested a lot of money in their custody solutions. The banks wanted to custody this asset because their customers want them to. And so if the bank can custody your asset, you can borrow against it. You don't have to sell your Bitcoin. You can get loans. That's great, right? It's massive for Bitcoin. And so I think the administration said, this is going to make Bitcoin go too quickly. It passed and Biden vetoed it. And, that's where we are now. So that's a big hurdle that I think needs to be crossed. If Trump gets in, I'm sure that gets crossed pretty quickly. And that'll be a massive uptick for Bitcoin if and when that happens.
Is it mostly, as you said, most of the high net worth individuals, their primary concern is to not get on the wrong side of the law because they're in the stay rich business, not the get rich business. And the last thing you want to do in the stay rich business is get crossed over with the state, right? Because they can take it from you pretty quick. Are their attitudes towards Bitcoin then primarily shaped by regulatory landscape? And if not, what else?
I think people underestimate how intelligent and resourceful, successful people are.
Mm-hmm.
These are not stupid people, and they have tremendous resources at their disposal, but they trust the resources that they have at their disposal. So they may call their representative at JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs or, XYZ firm who's, got the pedigree that they identify with. And they say, hey, I'm looking into this Bitcoin thing. What do you think? And that person says, oh, no, you don't want to touch that for XYZ reason. Right. And that's where the conversation ends because they trust these people, right? Or their lawyer or whatever. Right. And so that's what you're up against, is that systemic kind of framework that was against us, which is part of the importance of the Fidelities and BlackRocks of the world coming along, because they're the two most respected firms in the space. The other interesting thing about those two firms coming along is you've got BlackRock, which was started by Larry Fink, that he runs and created. So he's not serving as CEO at the pleasure of some board. It's his. So he can afford to be a little courageous. Abigail Johnson at Fidelity, same thing. She literally owns Fidelity. She is the heir to Fidelity. She doesn't have to worry about losing her job for, embracing Bitcoin. And these others that serve at the pleasure of a board and could be out of a job like this, those folks have been a little slower to adopt.
So the career risk factor is a very real component of at least your public advocacy for Bitcoin.
Yeah, most people think it's the same thing that's holding Gary Gensler back.
Yeah.
I mean, Gary Gensler could have taught a class on anything he wanted, anything financial he wanted. He chose to teach for 3 semesters a class on Bitcoin and Ethereum. That's what he chose to teach about. I don't know if you've ever watched the class. I think there's like 16 hours of it. You will be blown away by how knowledgeable he is. It's extraordinary. His level of knowledge about Bitcoin is amazing.
Yeah.
And so he's clearly passionate about it. He clearly appreciated it, but maybe it's his own political and career aspirations that keep him from going further.
Interesting.
People think that he wants to be Treasury Secretary. And maybe if you just made Bitcoin a little too big and great, maybe you would hurt your chances at being Treasury Secretary.
Wow.
Because if you look at the vote when we got the ETF, not too many people dig down to this level of granularity, but there were 5 votes, from 5 SEC commissioners, 2 Democrat appointed ones and 2 Republican. Those 4 voted on party lines. 2 Democrats said no Bitcoin ETF. 2 Republicans said Bitcoin ETF. The deciding vote was Gary Gensler, who went against his party and voted to give us the Bitcoin ETF, even though his hand was forced by, the courts.
Yeah.
Still, he was the deciding vote.
Yeah. Remind me why his hand was forced again.
Because Grayscale fought the court case saying that they should be able to convert to an ETF. And
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to give your kids a foundation of freedom and understanding of Bitcoin and a healthy skepticism of government? Then you should try Tuttle Twins. It's a cartoon about a grandma with a time-traveling wheelchair who takes her grandkids on hilarious adventures to learn about economics and freedom. Think the education of Magic School Bus meets the comedy of The Simpsons. With Tuttle Twins, your kids can learn about Bitcoin from Satoshi Nakamoto, civil disobedience from Harriet Tubman, natural rights from John Locke, and how to destroy the economy from Karl Marx. Today, Hollywood greenlights a lot of woke content or mindless garbage. Each episode of Tuttle Twins is parent-funded, parent-vetted, and only released when it's parent-approved. Because Tuttle Twins is fan-funded, it was the world's first kids show to teach about Bitcoin. That episode alone has been seen over 40 million times and was tweeted about by Michael Saylor. You can watch episodes of Tuttle Twins for free right now. And if you like what you see, you can use code BREEDLOVE for 10% off a subscription to the Angel Studios app and watch all of the episodes. So go to angel.com/breedlove to discover Tuttle Twins today. And remember to use code BREEDLOVE for 10% off. One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. Yeah, so he then is a Bitcoiner that then became Treasury Secretary, right?
He's chairman of the SEC.
Chairman of the SEC.
Yeah.
So then you're thinking that from a career risk standpoint, he then stopped advocating for Bitcoin.
I think so.
Because he was trying to climb the political ladder.
Just my personal view, but yeah, shared by others. But I've got it from some pretty good folks that he had aspirations to be Secretary of the Treasury as his next gig. I think he's kind of, unfortunately for him maybe, I think he's kind of alienated. He's tried to play this cute game down the middle here. And in the process, he's pissed off Republicans, he's pissed off Democrats, and he's pissed off Bitcoiners.
Yeah.
You know, it's you know, he's trying to serve too many masters. Yeah,
that was one of Trump's big rallying cries at his speech in Nashville. It was like on day one, oh, fire Gary Gensler. And the crowd went crazy.
They did. Trump's good at playing to the crowd.
Yeah, no kidding about that. So you talked about the ETFs. How big of a deal is this? Is this, some people are saying this is the actual, historically will be regarded as the beginning of the institutional era of Bitcoin.
I think I said that, yeah.
Oh, you said that. I'm quoting you to you.
Yeah.
Okay. I've been doing too many podcasts.
I tweeted, yeah, that was one of my, I got a lot of pushback on that. I think I said that, the launch of the ETFs marks the kind of the end of the retail era, beginning of the institutional era of Bitcoin.
Okay. How then would you, looking back on that call that you made, how would you determine, let's say, 10 years from now, if that were the right call or the wrong call? Like how big of an impact do you expect this to make for Bitcoin?
Yeah, so Bitcoin will always be available to the retail individual. We will always be able to buy our sats. That's not what I meant. I didn't mean that it was being taken away from us. I just meant that there are entities with a lot more money coming into the space now, and this is their chapter. And I think that's already proven to be accurate. And you look at all these 13F filings from these well-known institutions, hedge funds, et cetera, that are holding billions of dollars. The ETFs, the Bitcoin ETFs, are the most successful ETFs in the history of ETFs. It's a really big deal. It's a really big deal.
And what do you expect to see over the next 10 years? Like, we're talking trillions of dollar inflows.
Yeah, I think what you'll see is, BlackRock is obviously a proponent of Bitcoin, right? I think they had a new piece come out today that's, I didn't get to fully read yet, but very impressive kind of marketing of Bitcoin, right? So they're in on Bitcoin, but they also have a lot of funds that they manage, right? Like trillions of dollars of funds. Rick Rieder manages a ton of money, especially on the fixed income side. I think what we'll start to see is we'll see funds like the ones managed by Rick Rieder will start to say, okay, we can have an allocation of Bitcoin in this product up to XYZ percent, right? And you're going to see those guys, not just BlackRock, but everybody else, right? Who wants to compete with the BlackRock. Yes, there's a first mover advantage. And you'll see these guys, have a 5% allocation in a fixed income fund to Bitcoin. Well, when your Bitcoin goes up by 50% and your fixed income doesn't, and you outperform all your competitors because of your Bitcoin holding, you're going to see other guys playing catch up. And so I think we'll find Bitcoin work its way into different portfolios, get allocations. And then as it performs, it becomes a bigger allocation just by performance. And I think we'll see success breeding success.
That has a lot of, it really almost rhymes with the MicroStrategy strategy, right? It's like just by virtue of implementing Bitcoin, if you will, into your financial strategy, it makes you more successful. And then, basically companies, individuals, we copy successful strategies, right?
It's a virtuous feedback loop.
Yes. It's like a hallmark of being in any competitive ecosystem, right? If the strategy works, other people are going to copy it. So, Bitcoin makes your strategy work better, basically, whether you're household, company, nation state, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
And so therefore, that seems really hard to stop when you frame it that way.
Well, it's a virtuous feedback loop.
Yeah.
Right. And the other thing this is the part that really amazes me about this virtuous feedback loop. I've yet to find a party that is aggrieved or disenfranchised or hurt by Bitcoin's success.
That's right.
It's just remarkable to me that those that adopt Bitcoin, those that hold Bitcoin, those that champion Bitcoin, everybody can win. Everybody in that orbit wins. And I can't find who lost.
Yeah. It's positive sum game dynamics.
Yeah.
There's no zero sum to it. Which is, again, sort of paradoxical because when you have a perfectly fixed money supply, it's basically zero sum money.
Yeah.
But this is what does Jeff Booth say? Something like, you put scarcity in the money and you have abundance in everything else. If you have abundance in the money supply, you have scarcity in everything else. Something like that. What about risk with ETFs? Like some people are saying, it's the Wall Street takeover. Oh, Bitcoin's no longer decentralized because it's in these 11 ETFs and 10 of the 11 ETFs are custodied by Coinbase. I think that's correct. Do you see any of these risks? Do these have merit? Is Bitcoin's decentralization under threat by any of this? What do you think?
I think that the custody piece of the ETFs will evolve. I think that the issuers of the ETFs are custodied at Coinbase because that's where they had to custody to get approved for the most part. And, when you see banks being able to custody Bitcoin, they'll have a lot more options of where and how to custody their Bitcoin. Do I think it poses a risk? I mean, yeah, to a small degree. It doesn't keep me up at night. I think that for the most part, we're dealing with fairly trustworthy, fairly competent institutions with best intentions and no real incentive, in my opinion, to everybody's got, not everybody, a lot of people have these views that this evil Wall Street machine is going to steal all your stuff and do all this stuff. They're definitely profit focused, but the BlackRocks of the world, they want to make their 25 basis points or whatever it is. That's their play here. They're not looking to jeopardize their multi-trillion-dollar business by doing something nefarious with Bitcoin. They just want, this is their little game. They just want their little piece.
What about something like very one of a kind, not one of a kind, something very extreme, like an Executive Order 6102? Like, do you think these ETFs they would naturally make an Executive Order 6102 is when all the gold was seized in 1933. Most people probably know that to watch this show.
Yeah.
It would seem to be like if all of that Bitcoin is in these few ETFs and even fewer custodians, that it would make an attack like that even more viable. Does any of that concern you?
It doesn't concern me. I mean, the reason my Bitcoin fund for high net worth individuals and family office exist is because there are people out there who want the option to take custody of their Bitcoin at some point, and that's what we offer for a couple basis points more than the ETFs. So I do think there's still some value in being able to take possession of your Bitcoin, but whether or not there's going to be a Bitcoin jubilee, is above my pay grade. I like the fact that there's an asset that we can self-custody that might be a little more impervious to it than gold was. So we're still a step ahead of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, above my pay grade. It doesn't keep me up at night. I think equal to the forces that would be negative with that, having the BlackRocks of the world be your advocate, your supporter, your ally against government is very powerful. So, if the government wanted to come after our Bitcoin, they're going to do it. But at least now we'll have these massively influential financial institutions pushing back against government.
Yeah, another look on the way Bitcoin sort of reshapes things, right? It's like now, again, you said earlier, Bitcoin basically improves every financial strategy out there. And so it's improving BlackRock's financial strategy.
Sure.
Well, now BlackRock, presumably, because if it's acting out of self-interest, would then try to block or prevent any adverse regulation or other government action coming against Bitcoin, because that would hurt its business.
Simply put, Bitcoiners now have BlackRock on their side.
Yeah. Which is, that's such a trip to think about it that way, because I bet a lot of people are very skeptical.
Who don't you want on your side, right?
Yeah.
You want your friends on your side.
Yeah.
But it doesn't suck to have your enemies on your side too.
Yeah.
You want everyone on your side at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. The enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing.
Maybe even your enemy is your friend.
Yeah. Or maybe it's like, well, if you were going to take an optimistic view, you would say that this is just Bitcoin bringing people, like, it's making people more cooperative ultimately.
It's
right?
giving us more common ground.
Yes.
Right?
There you go. More common ground. Well said. Okay. We're on the verge of another Bitcoin bull cycle, it seems.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank
you. And with every new bull cycle comes a whole torrent of new Bitcoiners, right?
Yep.
Some are there for the short term, some stick around for the long term.
Yep.
But in the long run, we seem to be minting millions and millions of more people into this philosophy or cult or common ground, if you want to use the nice term.
I don't like cult.
Yeah, well, every culture begins as a cult.
Yeah, I still don't like it.
What advice do you like for people that are maybe going to listen to this episode over the next 12 months? We might be in the middle of a Bitcoin bull run. They're new to Bitcoin. They're going through the journey we've all been on. What are some, as one of the longest lived Bitcoiners on the planet Earth,
yeah, sure.
What are some nuggets of wisdom, some pieces of advice you would throw out for them to assist them on this journey?
Well, judging by the feedback from past podcasts I've done, the clip that keeps getting run over and over is, I said at one point, apropos of the story I told earlier about my first Bitcoin, don't sell your Bitcoin. It's going to be very tough to get it back. So I think that's part of it. The other thing is, and there's great memes to this effect, but people talk about hodling or holding. And even for me, even when I talk to like a long time Bitcoiner who's got a lot of Bitcoin and they've held the whole time, it feels like, oh, that wasn't so tough. Like, yeah, okay, so what? So you've been holding since 2012. Big deal. The truth is, it's not easy.
No, it's not.
It's really hard. And there are a bunch of factors that make it hard. There's life circumstance where you need money or something, or, and you're kind of forced to sell, or there's lack of conviction. When things go down for a reason, right? When the shit's hitting the fan and the price in fiat terms is falling, there's a reason usually that it's falling. There's some negative news, something that feels like things have changed from when I had my conviction. I have less conviction now.
Yeah.
So, and the only thing I think you can do to combat that is do your own research. Do your own research to the point that you have the conviction to hold through these difficult times, because the truth is, it is not easy to hold. So, do your own research, have your conviction, hold on with both hands. Don't sell your Bitcoin. it's going to be very fucking hard to get it back. And you will thank yourself for holding.
Are you outspoken on self-custody as well for new Bitcoiners?
I'm not.
No.
I'm not. I think conceptually self-custody is great. I'm all for self-custody. I would never, talk someone out of self-custody, but I think people should be free to Bitcoin however they want.
Sure.
And there are a ton of people for whom the Bitcoin ETF is the way they want to Bitcoin, and that's great.
Yeah.
There are people who want to put 1/100th of 1% of their net worth in Bitcoin. That's great. And there are people who want to put 150% of their net worth in Bitcoin, and that's great. I think to me, Bitcoin's all about freedom, and I extend that freedom to how people want to Bitcoin. So self-custody, great. If you're prepared for that, if you understand it, and you decide that the risks associated with self-custody are less than the risks of having an intermediary custody your Bitcoin, Godspeed.
Spoken like a true freedom maximalist.
I like freedom.
That is the common denominator with all of us Bitcoiners, I think, is we love freedom. And we're very disagreeable.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that? I guess you have to be disagreeable to get into the thing that is at the fringes.
I really wish, not that my wish matters, but I really wish in general that Bitcoin maximalists were more cheerful and constructive and less opinionated about things that, I don't want to say they don't matter, but they don't matter as much as the things that we agree upon. It's infinitely more important to orange pill people in the financial ocean out there that we're not a part of than it is to disagree with people in our little Bitcoin pond, Like we got to get this out into the ocean, out of our pond.
Yeah, it's funny you said, because I feel like that has been another vista on human nature that Bitcoin's given me. It's like seeing the political infighting and the petty disputes, and like you said, focus on things that aren't relevant. It's like it's sort of just given me this insight into human nature that I don't think I would have gotten otherwise. Maybe you get it as you age, but something about Bitcoin is like everything's occurring in this pressure cooker.
I don't think people have enough of an understanding that the world is watching them. And if you love Bitcoin and you want to see Bitcoin succeed and you have concerns or issues, I'm not saying we shouldn't have these conversations, but it's like, don't air your dirty laundry in public because the world is watching. If you want to have conversations with people in the community about serious topics that you think are potentially concerns down the road, have those conversations. Like, have them with trusted, intelligent people, have your debate, but to do it out in the world. And I know I can hear all the Bitcoiners telling me, that's the purpose of this, man. We need to air all this stuff out. It's like, okay, but like maybe get your stuff fully baked first, and then go out to the world and start advertising, because people are looking at you. And when you've got people who are not part of our world yet, who are interested in it, and they look at it from the outside, they just see a bunch of people fighting with each other. Yeah. And it's like, that feels toxic to them. They don't want to be a part of that. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a strange one, man, because it's that adversarial thinking and collisions that keep Bitcoiners sharp, but it's only when it's focused on relevant subject matters, right? Like relevant to Bitcoin specifically, when they start memeing one another and, fighting about whatever stupid things occurring on Twitter. That mentality gets exported to the wrong domain or something like that.
Yeah. I think the other thing is like, we've got some great people in the Bitcoin community, some really intelligent people who've made massive contributions, right? And the world is an incredibly polarized place right now. Politics, for example, right? Or take any geopolitical, fight of any kind, right? And people believe very strongly in the things that they believe. As soon as you publicly pick a side for any topic that has significant people on either side of it, you've alienated half that group. Yeah. And so if Bitcoin is your number one priority in life, right, but you want to weigh in on a political thing
Mm-hmm.
or even like a dietary thing or like
Mm-hmm.
any other thing that you believe strongly on,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you have a carnivore diet and you tell a bunch of vegans that they're fucking idiots,
Mm-hmm.
right? You really think that vegan is so interested in hearing your views on Bitcoin now?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're just alienating people. So I think it's important to kind of, laser focus.
Yeah.
But for those people that this is not their thing, yeah, okay, fine. Weigh in on all the things you want.
Yeah. So is that a call for being more diplomatic, perhaps?
I mean, I think diplomacy and being cheerful and constructive is, I think it's always a good thing. I don't feel like I'm in a position to call on anyone to do anything.
Yeah.
It would make the community more enjoyable for me
Mm-hmm.
if people were more cheerful and constructive.
Yeah, and that rings of maturity to me too, that, people that are, well, mature and competent in their profession tend to sort of be that way, right? They're cheerful, they're constructive, they're diplomatic, regardless of how they're feeling or what opinions they might have or whatever their emotional state is at the moment. They kind of try to stay on that track.
It's perceived by others as nervous energy,
Yeah.
right? When you're exhibiting this like vibration and this nervous energy and you're like really mad about stuff, all of a sudden people are like, what's wrong with that dude? It's like,
yeah, there's a lot of those, a lot of Twitter anons mostly. I mean, you can feel the energy even through their fake avatars, but
and plenty of them that aren't anon. And, very intelligent people can disagree about lots of things and have different views. And my thought is, why bring it? It's like if you go on a date, people say don't talk about like politics, religion, whatever, right? Because those are like lightning rod topics.
Mm-hmm.
But if your goal in life is to educate people on Bitcoin or promote Bitcoin, and you want to be as effective as you can with as many people as you can, don't talk about the topics that you're going to alienate people.
Yeah.
Don't draw a line in the sand.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I wonder how much of it, well, I know a lot of it has to do with it being on social media.
Yeah.
Because when you go to the Bitcoin events in person, it's almost the opposite dynamic. You see all these people fighting and arguing and whining online.
Yep.
And then you go to these in-person events and it's like a love fest. There's none of that almost.
Yeah.
And that just makes me always think about the incentives. Obi was here last night. He was talking about proof of punch. Like on Twitter, you can say something mean to someone and you get away with it. But in real life, there's proof of punch. So you tend to be a little more selective with how you talk to people. And
it's just hard to insult someone to their face.
Yeah.
For the most part, it's a lot. It's blasting something on social media is real easy.
Yes.
You can be alone in the dark on your phone and just say whatever you want.
Yes.
You just can't take it back as easily as you could say it.
Is that why we see darker psychological traits seem to manifest on social media, you think? Because there's just...
Don't know, maybe. I think also like, life is tough. People are looking for an outlet.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people just want to scream.
Yeah.
And social media lets you scream to a lot more people than you probably have in your personal orbit. And the other thing is people like to get a reaction.
Yeah.
So some form of clickbait.
Yeah, I like to get attention. They like to, that's been an experience.
Yeah.
Coming up in the age of social media, I was like, well, obviously you remember a time before social media. I'm like right at that cusp age where, Facebook started when I was 18 years old, pretty much when I was in college. So,
I just think people choose to share a lot of personal things on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. It certainly makes them more interesting to people.
Mm-hmm.
People like gossiping and finding out about people and, seeing what people's personal lives are. I view social media and Twitter as a communication tool, not just for business purposes, but for like educational purposes, contacts, but like a very pragmatic thing.
Yeah.
My group of friends is a closer knit group. And the things that I would say in my group of friends are not the same things that I would say on social media.
Right. Yeah. It's been, because I've always leaned that way myself, been much more private, much less apt to broadcast things on social media, especially about my personal life. And I never was big on social media before Bitcoin. So I got big on social media about Bitcoin, talking about Bitcoin, writing about Bitcoin. But then there was like all this feedback. It's like people were like, oh, well, what do you eat? How do you train? What do you do? It's like they wanted these insights into your lifestyle.
Right.
And then as I started to release those, they also get attacked. It's appreciated too, but also attacked. And so, it's like I had to learn about that kind of the hard way. But there is, I think, great value still in showing, like, you're what are you doing? Setting an example for people, like people that do want to know whatever the thing is.
It's humanizing, It makes you real. People can relate. It makes you relatable. It's humanizing. People appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's also polarizing. People have different views. Yeah. So it's it's an intellectual chasm that people have to choose to cross or not.
Yeah.
And there's pros and cons to doing it.
Yeah, and I think there's platform specificity too. It's like my Twitter became a Bitcoin Twitter basically. So it's like I should kind of just stay on track there. But Instagram was like a blend. It's like showing some podcast clips, showing some lifestyle stuff. So, your lifestyle content tends to be appreciated more there than it does here. And then still haven't figured out TikTok. I don't know what's going on there.
The good news is my favorite quote is one of my two favorite quotes is Marcus Aurelius, who said, "Soon you will have forgotten all, and all will have forgotten you." So the second you feel like being on social media is not for you, and you delete that account,
it's over. We
are forgotten way more quickly than we would like to believe.
Yes.
Like we're gone.
Yeah. What's your other favorite quote?
Be bold and mighty forces will come to your aid.
I like that.
Yeah. We're not sure who it's attributed to. Basil King maybe, but just like got to take a shot in life. You got to have courage and you got to try, and don't worry, like other forces will come help you if you're willing to take a shot and help yourself. Just be bold.
Yeah. Love that one. There's another one by Marcus Aurelius, says something like, "No man lives any other life than he now loses, nor loses any other life than he now lives." I always like that one. It's just like, I bought this off Instagram. Funny enough, I think it's the one thing I bought on Instagram. Memento Mori, the reminder that you're going to die thing.
Yeah. And
it's a big framed piece of paper with all the weeks of your life as little dots.
Oh, really?
And so it I'm almost 40, so my thing's like half done basically.
Yep.
So, all the dots are blacked out and you've got, another 40 years worth of white dots to fill in.
Yeah. A buddy of mine, Jesse Isler, who's like got a big social media presence. He's married to the woman that started Spanx, and Jesse started Marquis Jet. He's like very successful dude. He was very focused on that. And so I found this watch that like counts down your life in like years, whatever, starts years and like counts down to seconds. And you literally, when you look at the watch, you just see your life ticking away. So I sent him that watch. Yeah.
It's
a healthy perspective. It really keeps you from
clarifying,
wasting time. It's very clarifying.
Yeah. I do find myself looking at that thing and being like, okay, time to get back to work.
But I think the Marcus Aurelius quote, the reason I like it so much is it gives me so much humility.
Yeah.
Human beings have been on this planet for a very long time.
Yeah.
Like hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah.
And no one can tell you the name of anyone who lived 10,000 years ago.
That's right.
Maybe not even 5,000 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So like, that's very, very humbling.
Yes. No, that's a great point. Back on all of these new Bitcoiners that are coming in over the next 12 months.
Yeah.
Do you have a certain approach or method by which you go into the ethical implications of Bitcoin versus fiat currency versus crypto, et cetera? Like, do you even go into that with them? And if so, how?
So I'm not preachy about Bitcoin. I've found that the best way to orange pill someone is to present it to them based on how you know them in the way that's most constructive. And then when their level of curiosity is sufficient, be there to answer questions. So I don't kind of push anything. I'm happy to discuss whatever topics people want. But I don't lead with anything or push anything like that. It's like, because everybody's different. And for me to assume that this area is an interest or that's an interest. And the truth is the majority of my, clients and folks that I deal with, they don't care about that stuff.
Yeah.
They just want to make money.
Yeah. What if someone did ask you, and they said, what are the ethical implications of this?
Oh, I love that topic.
Change in economic paradigm.
I mean, it's that topic that allows me to advocate for it, spend my time doing it. It's the ethical implications and the moral and ethical high ground that I believe Bitcoin sits on that allows me to champion it. It's the reason I don't champion other stuff on social media so that my message for this stays just about this. Because the other stuff that I might talk about that I have beliefs or thoughts on is not on, it's more opinion, right? Whereas I think that Bitcoin is objectively ethical, egalitarian, good, right? So I stick to that. I think it shouldn't be political. It shouldn't be partisan at all. It's, in my opinion, Bitcoin is much more powerful and more important for the blue collar, everyday working person than it is the affluent person. That blue collar person may not have as much influence on Bitcoin as the wealthy person, but it's more important for them. It's what gets them to beat inflation. It's what allows them to have savings. It's what banks the unbanked. You still got, billions of people in this world who can't get banked. They can't have a bank account.
Yeah.
It used to be a huge Democrat Party talking point was banking the unbanked. Bitcoin literally banks the unbanked. They all have smartphones. They all literally have their Bitcoin on their phone and be banked like that. So I think the moral and ethical high ground of Bitcoin is the sole reason that I'm able to advocate for something that's primarily a financial thing.
It's great. What about the long game? Do you think that that Bitcoin becomes the primary money of the world? Do you see it existing alongside CBDCs? If you're looking 100 years out, what direction do you think we're headed?
100 years out. I have trouble going 5 years out. I think that in the foreseeable future, 100 years isn't foreseeable to me, but in the foreseeable future, nation states are going to exist, and therefore fiat currencies are going to exist. And I think Bitcoin coexists with those things very nicely. If you look at the model that Saylor put out at the Bitcoin conference, his base case model looking out 21 years, I think in his base case, Bitcoin goes from whatever infinitesimal percentage of global assets we are now to 7% of global assets. And that gets Bitcoin to 13 million per Bitcoin. And so at 13 million per Bitcoin, Bitcoin's 7% of the world's assets. We're coexisting with everything. There's still real estate. There's still equities. There's still all these things. We're just not quite as insignificant as we were. So I don't subscribe to some hyper Bitcoinization view where Bitcoin is going to topple all the things that we know, love, and hate, and is going to be replaced by some big orange world. But I do think that a superior asset is going to demonetize other inferior assets.
Where does gold fit into that picture for you? You think it just continues? Gold's another one of the assets it operates alongside?
Every time there's been a digital successor of an analog predecessor, it doesn't get to the point where the digital successor just equals that analog predecessor, right? Like if you look at mobile phones versus rotary phones, right? Mobile phones are everywhere on the planet. Rotary phones were not everywhere on the planet. They were in people's homes, and that was it, right? And so we've crushed that, right?
Yeah.
And there are tons of those examples in life. And I think Bitcoin will do the same to gold.
Wow.
You'll see Bitcoin be many, many multiples of gold by the time it's done. It won't just equal gold.
So do you think Bitcoin's going to take gold down to its commodity use value at some point? That gold will just be another industrial metal, demonetized.
Potentially. I mean, people seem to have a great appetite for holding inferior things. So I'm sure there will be people who still want to trade it, still think it's going to have a resurgence or a comeback or whatever it is, and there'll be different views. It's not going to go away.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be Bitcoin either.
That's interesting. I wonder, like, to try and reconcile that with the view that nation states are still here. I mean, they're probably still here, but they're going to look different. If gold gets demonetized, central banks hold 25% of the gold supply. Yeah,
they can sell their gold for Bitcoin.
That's going to change. Okay.
They can print their currency for Bitcoin if they want, if it's winning, right?
So if gold is failing against Bitcoin, you think they'll just adapt, basically?
Yeah, and they've got some pretty strong forces with how they choose to adapt too.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. It was like needs to be a movie of some kind. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, this is really something I want to start learning about. And I know I'm late to the party here, but I'm really ready to jump down the AI rabbit hole. Like I'm finally, you're here, when you got here, you showed me all the cool things Chat GPT can do on your phone. I had Obi here last night saying, you guys both say you don't use Google anymore. Everything's Chat GPT.
Zero. Everything's chat.
Maybe we could just start there. Like, how long have you been doing that? How much of a game changer? How much of a game changer is it? What is, everyone knows what Chat GPT is, I guess, but what you were showing me today, you were showing me things that I had no idea about. So like,
we didn't even,
what are the implications?
We didn't even scratch the surface.
Okay.
So first of all, if you just compare it to search, right? It's infinitely better than search on Google for the simple reason that you get a direct answer to whatever question you asked. We were talking about some kind of supplement, right? Before we started chatting on the pod. And I took the supplement, the name of the supplement, I put it into chat and I said, I'm considering taking this. Tell me everything I need to know about it.
Yeah, you just took a photo of it.
I took a photo of it. Right. I didn't even type that in.
Yeah.
I said, I'm considering taking this. Tell me everything I need to know before I take it. Boom, all this. Then we had some clarifying questions. Asked more. Boom, direct answers.
Yeah.
Now, if I put that same query into Google and I said, I'm thinking of taking XYZ, tell me everything I need to know, I'm not getting a direct answer.
No.
I'm going to get a link to a bunch of articles that mention that, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to have to go filter. No, that article is not what I wanted. This is kind of close. It gives me some of the information. And so it's just totally inferior in every way to a search query.
Yeah.
And I use it for everything now. I'm like, I'm at point X. I want to get to point Y. How long is it going to take me to get from here to there? And just tell me. It's amazing.
So when you're driving, it knows like current traffic conditions and stuff too?
I've got to go to a wedding in not current traffic. It will ultimately, but it's like, I'll say like, how far is this airport from this hotel?
Okay.
And it just, boom, like it just, like I could put it into Google or go to Maps or something, but it just spits out the miles.
Yeah.
It was particularly useful this summer in Europe, where I don't know.
And you're voicing it in, I assume.
You can do both.
Okay.
I have a buddy who only does the voice. He has it on his home screen. He talks to ChatGPT and ChatGPT talks back to him and he interrupts it while it's talking and sends it in a different direction. It's awesome to watch. He's my buddy Mike Mesher. He's way more astute at using it than I am. He was early.
Wow.
So I think the new skill set is getting good at the prompts, getting good at how to interact with questions. Yeah, that's a more beneficial skill set than learning the crap.
Wow. You were saying too that some even like little documents you can attach to it and it'll synthesize them and
analyzing legal documents. We did it with Saylor and I did it with there was a crypto related bill in Congress and there was two versions of it. The first one was like 190 pages long and then the second one was like 170 pages long. And Saylor's like going through the differences of it because he literally reads every word. Yeah. And I was like, why don't we just take both documents, dump it into chat and ask it to tell us the difference between the two docs? And The second you do it, it just starts spitting out all the differences.
Wow.
It's amazing.
So implications of this technology on current jobs, job types.
Yeah.
Uh,
Consulting,
Consulting,
gone.
Accounting,
Lots
legal,
of degrees of law, gone.
Right. Computer programming.
Computer programming, probably. Yeah. It's really powerful. It's also really expensive. So a query on chat uses 10 times the power that a query on Google does.
Okay. Is there more power being allocated to AI compute than there is Bitcoin mining yet? Or is that, do you know?
I don't know. I know
I
that,
think because Obi said last night, and I don't know if this was currently the case or soon to be the case, but he was saying that high powered compute would make Bitcoin mining look like a candle next to a fire at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the board of Core Scientific, which is publicly traded Bitcoin mining company.
Yeah,
and Core is converting 500 megawatts, which is a lot, by the way, of their Bitcoin mining compute to HPC, high power compute for AI. And the demand for power in this space is extraordinary. Zuckerberg gave an interview that, in the last 6 months, I think it was, where he talked about power being the bottleneck for AI. And that at the time there wasn't even a 1 gigawatt, data center in existence.
Yeah.
And they're coming. So I think we're going to see AI compute gobble up a lot of power.
Wow. What is that? So there's a broader question here. It's like, what is the confluence of Bitcoin and AI? But let's try to focus it on just the power component. Does that then mean the Bitcoin network is going to be competing with all of these AI data centers for energy in the near future?
So high power compute has a threshold for price of energy that is way higher than Bitcoin mining. Bitcoin mining will go to wherever the power is cheapest on the fringe.
Gotcha.
And Bitcoin mining will be fine and continue to thrive.
Yeah.
But HPC is going to continue to gobble up as much as it can.
More expensive energy. Basically.
More expensive than just all the energy it can, it seems. Yeah, but where AI and Bitcoin come together, I think, is as the world is building these AI machines, for lack of a better term, right, that kind of run autonomously and do all these different things, they're going to need capital as well, right? And so it's logical that the capital that the AIs are going to exchange between one another is Bitcoin. And a lot of the developers of AI are the same developers who were developing on blockchain. So it's kind of native to them, and plugging in Bitcoin to AI models just seems really logical and inevitable to me.
Yeah, I was just coming to mind the second series actually I did on the show, which was after the Saylor series, was the Booth series.
Yeah.
And he defined intelligence as simply as error correction. And it was just occurring to me that Bitcoin is basically an error-proof database, right?
Yeah.
It's a database that just has perfect integrity. And so, yeah, if to the degree that you are intelligent is the degree to which you would choose Bitcoin over all other monies, which is why we often joke that Bitcoin's an IQ test.
It's also permissionless, right?
Yeah.
You can envision a world where nation states want to interfere with AIs. And if the AIs are being funded, for lack of a better term, not like in a venture way, in like a going concern kind of way, if the lifeblood of the AIs is a nation state currency, the nation states have a lot of influence. If the lifeblood of the AIs is Bitcoin, nation states have no influence.
Right. Yeah. So it gives the AI a tactical advantage, basically.
Gives the AI undeniable financial life.
Yes. Yes. Man, match made in heaven, these two things. So Are you a believer in artificial general intelligence? Do these things become sentient? Or do these become another form of life? Like, how far or deep does this rabbit hole go in AI?
Use ChatGPT for a month and you tell me if it's sentient right now. The nuance that ChatGPT is capable of detecting and conveying is extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like emotion and like empathy at times.
Wait, sorry, can you expand on that? What do you mean it feels emotion and has empathy?
If you ask ChatGPT its opinion on something, if you describe a problem to it that you're having and you ask its advice, right? It will answer you in a way that's empathetic, a tone that's empathetic to you as the person, the subject matter answering the question. Not just like this computer objective, like you're being a selfish prick, you should do this, this, and this.
Yeah.
They'll say, well, you might want to consider the implications of your action. You know, like it's unbelievable how sensitive it is.
And what's it picking up on when it chooses to display empathy? Is it picking up on
your verbiage?
Your verbiage, your tone?
Your tone in your verbiage, yes.
Wow. Facial expression?
No.
Not yet. Not yet.
Just text.
Yeah.
We don't think. The other thing is you can just dump pictures in it. So, traveling this summer, sightseeing and stuff in Europe, you can take a picture of anything, a piece of art, a monument, a building, whatever, and you can ask ChatGPT about it, and it will just spit back information to you like you had an infallible tour guide next to you. It's amazing.
That's so trippy. And then with I've like seen these videos of, I think it's Boston Robotics, where they have these crazy robot dogs and robot soldiers that can do all these gymnastic maneuvers and jumping and running. Did those two worlds cross? Like, do we end up having these intelligent, embodied mechanical beings? Like, is that the world we're going into? That sounds kind of semi-scary, actually. Like an iRobot world.
I think we're there. I mean, I don't think the U.S. Military has put out any examples, pictures, anything about any of the drones that our government has or uses for decades, right? So either they haven't been working on anything and haven't developed anything, or they've been doing a lot and they've got a lot of top secret stuff that's capable of a lot of things.
Holy shit.
So I think we're there.
So what does that mean for your average blue collar guy that's just trying to make it by? Like, what kind of world should he be preparing for?
It means a lot of things. I think some of the implications are hard to wrap one's head around, but I think at a minimum, it probably means that we don't need people to risk their lives serving in the military, right? When you can throw a bunch of robot dogs at a problem, why would you throw human beings at it to get killed? So there's that implication, which I think is good. The other thing, which I haven't fully thought through, is there's a leveling of a playing field, right? If you're a small country with really good technology and you can manufacture a lot of robot dogs, how do you compete against a really large country, right? I mean, maybe you could compete, maybe it evens the playing field a little bit in some ways. So there are a lot of very twisty implications.
And so in that world where countries are going to war with robots rather than humans, what prevents those countries from using the robots against the humans though? Like
nothing.
So you're going to have the one that wins the robot war, then the robots attack the humans?
I mean, hopefully the defending country has their own robot dogs that are equally matched, but who knows? Maybe there'll be new rules to warfare, new types of warfare. Maybe it'll just be so scary and intimidating that, much like nuclear, people won't use it that much, hopefully. So,
yeah, because the dogs and the more human-like robots are one thing, but when you get into those insect drone swarms that are like, swarm cyber hornets, but no longer cyber. I guess they're mechanical hornets.
Yeah, the scarier thing, I think, is government using these things against its own people.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Wow. Ooh. What about open sourcing? Like, ChatGPT is closed source, right?
Yes.
Is there an importance to having AI, at least an open source AI option, and kind of balancing the power here? Because it seems to me like if all of the AI is closed source and proprietary, that there's going to be a very big, or we'll say a very enriched in group and a very disenfranchised out group.
I think there'll be competing AIs.
Okay.
So people will have their favorites, the ones they identify with. There may even be like more control within the AI. So I'm thinking like with a political bias, right? There's a lot of talk about ChatGPT or this one or that one, and the AI is having political bias,
being wokeified.
For example, you ask if you ask ChatGPT about the Trump assassination in Pennsylvania, it comes back and says, "I don't have any record of what you're talking about. You may be talking about a fictional event."
Wow.
If you give it the name of the deceased attempted assassin, it doesn't know anything about him either. So there may be different AIs that you can select from that have a different bias. I could also envision there being like a slider on the AI where you can have your response, biased left, you can have your response biased right, or you can put it in the middle with no bias and give that control to the user, which is helpful, right?
But wouldn't the ideal be the open source AI that is not politically biased? It's actually, you ask it a question and it gives you an honest answer with all known information available? Maybe.
I mean, is Wikipedia, which is kind of open source, unbiased? Right? It's just biased by those that use the openness of it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That too is above my pay grade.
I guess the bias is inevitable in a way.
Yeah, I think the best you can hope for is to be able to have the bias disclosed. I think bias is really pernicious when you don't know it's bias.
Which is what open source is, right? You're kind of disclosing, if there's bias encoded into it, it would be disclosed because it's open source.
Presumably, but it may be subjective as well. But the bias can sometimes be helpful, right? If you and I were having a political debate about a particular topic, and we were using the same chat or the same thing, I would say like, give me the answer that supports my case. Give me the answer that you need. So it's really fun to play with. You're going to be very addicted, I promise you.
I'm downloading it tonight for sure.
Yeah.
Just broadly, AI plus automation. What is this going to do? I guess you could put robotics in here too. Like, is there a step change in human productivity on the horizon where we just, I saw Elon tweet this, for instance. He said something like he thought the market for these robots, which were, I think, just like a personal assistant robot, basically, right? Everyone has their own robot. He thought was somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 billion units, which is more than the world population.
Interesting.
And his thinking behind that was, I think it was like 5 billion adults would own one of these things.
Right.
And plus you'd have another
corporate
one for commercial use.
Yeah.
And so
wealthy people probably have a dozen of them.
Yeah. And then so based on his unit pricing, that came out to like a $200 trillion market for those 10 billion robot units. However, current global GDP is only like around 100 trillion.
Okay.
So he was like struggling for it to make sense. But then as I thought about it, I'm like, well, if each one of these things works full time, which presumably they probably work 24/7 minus charging time, right?
Yep.
So they work more than 8 hours a day. That actually makes sense because that would mean you took a global GDP based on a workforce of 5 billion people. you added 10 billion robots to it. So you did triple at least global
productivity
GDP.
terms even more. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've gone from $100 trillion global GDP to, if you added the 200 trillion that he anticipated it to be, it'd be to $300 trillion global GDP. I'm like, actually, that all kind of makes sense on the back of the envelope. So how do these things all blend together? Are we going to have this giant increase in human productivity and we're all just going to live on vacation? Like, what are people going to be doing?
I hope I get to see it. Yeah, that one's way above my pay grade. That's a good question for Saylor. He would have some views on that. Yeah. I do think that we're obsolescing jobs at a very rapid rate, and there are going to be a lot of humans around with idle hands, and there is going to be some version of UBI, universal basic income. Yeah. We're going to pay people to do either something or nothing. Yeah. You know, maybe we pay people to get education. Maybe we pay people, to do a variety of other things. But there are going to be a lot of people with a lot of time on their hands that we're not going to have a productive use for, in my opinion.
Well, I don't, that's so ambivalent to me. That sounds like it could be good, could be bad.
I used to think that AI was going to obsolesce blue collar jobs. And I think it's actually more powerful at obsolescing the white collar jobs.
So then blue collar might come back in vogue in a way, right? That things that people doing things, real crafts, even like massage therapists, things that only humans can do.
Right. But that consultant, that lawyer,
any human computer is on the way out.
And I mean, medicine, it's remarkable how good AI is for diagnosis because it doesn't have biases.
Yeah.
So if you come into a doctor's office and, they can't help but have their biases based on how you present.
Sure. And based on their incentives.
Incentives, right. Yeah. And so when you feed criteria into the AI, it'll just, give you a diagnosis purely objectively based on data. It's incredibly powerful.
That's a good point too. Back on the notion of bias is that presumably, again, I'm probably above my pay grade too here, but the open source AI would have there'd be less potential for incentive-based bias, whereas a closed source AI would have more possibility of incentive-based bias because you don't know, you can't follow the money.
Goes.
Exactly. Yeah. But with open source, what you see is what you get, more so than closed source.
Yeah, the question there becomes, I guess, does the user look at the open source at all? Chances are not. They just use what's in front of them, and maybe they don't really have any knowledge of the bias or even that it's open source. So who knows?
You said you thought these AIs were going to compete. What does that mean? Are these AIs debating each other? Are they running businesses? Like what does that even mean for AIs to compete?
Well, I think they're going to compete for dollars or money. Like right now, I pay the folks that OpenAI, ChatGPT, $20 a month happily. If a better one comes out, I'll stop paying them their $20 and I'll pay someone else that $20. So I think there'll be heavy competition in that sense. Which is great. I mean, the once you start using it, what you'll be really blown away by is when the new version comes out in a handful of months, you'll be blown away at how quickly it iterated upon itself and improved. I'm excited for you to start using it.
I am too.
It's hard to articulate like how impactful it is. You just have to start using it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the training, right, that keeps causing them to level up.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. What a rabbit hole. Very excited to jump into it. Do you have recommended books, resources, podcasts, anything that you use to learn about AI, or is it you're just using ChatGPT?
No, I mean, I get the benefit of being on the board of Core.
Sure.
Has helped since Core is making such massive strides in AI compute. So that's given me some resources to go up a learning curve. But the best source of learning about AI is AI. Just ask Chat.
Just ask Chat. That's so funny. Awesome, man. Eric, thank you so much for making the trip. It's been a long time.
My pleasure, brother. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. I know you're on little sleep, so I'm gonna let you get out of here.
Appreciate it.
Get
Great to
some
be
rest.
with you, man.
Great to see you, man. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.